Tonight, a government, a prime minister and a chancellor under pressure after their welfare bill concessions. Number 10 says the chancellor has the prime minister's full support after a PMQs when Rachel Reeves was seen crying on the front bench. But can the government afford any more slip-ups after the welfare climb-down left relations with the backbenches in tatters and a black hole in the public finances that could mean more tax rises? I'll speak to the Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds. Protests outside Downing Street after a ban on the group Palestine Action is approved by MPs. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock tells the COVID inquiry that his pledge to throw a protective ring around care homes was not just empty rhetoric. And the sweet smell of success. As the Trump family start marketing a perfume, we'll look at whether the Trump brand is a guarantee of commercial success. All that and more with not one but two baronesses, Ayesha Hazarika and Nikki Morgan, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. I've thought a lot about whether it's the right thing to talk about Rachel Reeves crying at PMQs. Because, look, crying is not something we should be ashamed of or something we should be judged for, because crying is something associated with women, and in particular this misogynistic idea that women are too weak and emotional to be able to hack difficult jobs like being Chancellor. And remember, of course, Rachel Reeves is the first female Chancellor as well. And also because, you know, on a human level, I feel really sorry for her. I've cried at work. I'm sure lots of us have. And the Chancellor doesn't have the luxury of being able to hide in the toilets or, you know, slope off early. But people will talk about what happened at PMQs, because when it comes to politics, visual images stick. I remember that image of Rishi Sunak announcing the election in the pouring rain, an image he never really recovered from, or the conference letters falling off behind Theresa May, or Ed Miliband and the bacon sandwich. You know, people don't remember his tax proposals, but my gosh, they will not forget that bacon sandwich. And people will also remember Rachel Reeves crying at PMQs as well. Politics isn't fair, and none of these moments we remember were the fault of the individual. But here's the thing, they stuck in the public consciousness because of a sense they were symbolic of a wider truth. They didn't happen when politicians were at their strongest, you know, when they were Teflon. They happened when they were weak. And I can't emphasise enough what a big deal last night was. The government was forced to junk its flagship welfare policy just an hour or two before the vote. You know, that is such a big moment. And honestly, I'm not sure things will be the same again. It's a bit like a couple having a terrible argument in a long-term relationship. They might not break up, but something changes. They never completely recover. Keir Starmer's authority, the loyalty of the Parliamentary Labour Party, people's faith in the Number 10 operation, and most importantly, the bond of trust with the electorate. Because they told us again and again these changes were necessary and they had no choice. They said they were going to happen, and then they didn't. And I guess the question is, you know, how do they recover from this now? Well, lots to talk about on the programme tonight. I'm going to start off with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who's here with us. Sam, where are we at today? Where are we at?
So everybody will have seen the images of Rachel Reeves at Prime Minister's questions. I think it's important to say that right now, ministers, Downing Street, are going out of their way to stress there were personal factors involved, personal factors that we currently do not know. We might find out at some point. And so there appears to be a little bit more than we're aware of to what happened in the Commons chamber. But I couldn't agree with you. More visual images than that image of a Chancellor clearly in tears, holding back sobs and wiping away the water as it came down from her eye will stick with people because it happened hours after the government authority was really challenged with the way that they had to climb down over the welfare vote. We do not know that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves can once again get tough decisions through, despite their enormous majority. But also for Rachel Reeves particularly, this was a plan that was initiated because of her need for cash. And as a result of her being forced to climb down, she now faces something that I think is just all but impossible. She is facing a black hole of somewhere in the region, estimates vary a bit, of 15 to 20 billion That partly comprises of the money that she will no longer get as a result of welfare changes that will no longer happen. It'll also happen because of slightly worse economy. Filling a black hole of 15 to 20 billion pounds is really, really, really hard. I don't know how you do it, really. And she's got to do it by about November time when the budget comes along. That looks to me like a government that is stuck. I had a couple of conversations today, Sophie, that I really wasn't expected in the week of the anniversary of Keir Starmer's election. One was with a prominent Labour MP, one was with a minister in Keir Starmer's government. Both of them put the Prime Minister on notice. Both said the same thing. If, come next May, Labour performs terribly in that set of elections, and remember, there are elections in Scotland where Labour could win, there are elections in Wales where Labour could lose to Reform, there are elections in London where potentially you could end up without Labour in power there, going to Greens and others. If Labour do badly then, they said that could be Keir Starmer out. Maybe Keir Starmer should be out at that point. The level of unhappiness and despair in parts of the Labour Party is so striking that right now, on the first anniversary, I am hearing from ministers in the government, Keir Starmer might have to go in months.
That's astonishing. Sam, our Deputy Political Editor, thank you. If you just stay with us, if you may, I just want to bring in our duo for the evening as well. The former Labour advisor and broadcaster Baroness Ayesha Hazarika and the former Conservative Culture and Education Secretary Baroness Nicky Morgan. Great to have you both with us. Ayesha, I'm keen to come to you first. We've obviously heard what Sam had to say. Where do you think we are? The same question to you. Where are we today?
Well, there's no way of sugarcoating this. This is, a really, really bad moment for the Labour government, particularly as we should be celebrating our first year in government. And it's just worth saying it is not often that Labour Prime Ministers win power. There have only ever been 7 Labour Prime Ministers in the history of British politics. So Keir Starmer winning that big majority last year was a big deal. It was a great moment of hope for the party and for the country. But clearly, a year on, there are big problems. Now, I think what's happened is that there's clearly been a breakdown in relationship from the kind of centre leadership, which is sort of number 10 and number 11, and the wider parliamentary party. I think a number of things have to be looked at. First of all, I think there is actually, and I know this sounds weird given where things are, there was actually quite a lot of support for the government trying to do something on welfare, I think, right across the party, apart from a very small group of quite hardcore left-wing MPs. I think everybody bought into the argument that the welfare bill is going up too much, something needed to be done, but welfare reform needed to be done in a Labour way. Welfare is a really difficult issue for any party, particularly the Labour Party, which under Clement Attlee established the welfare state, of great proud tradition of Labour governments. So to sort of reform it is always going to be difficult. If you're going to do that, you need a lot of pitch rolling, need a lot of political engagement. You know it's going to be sort of difficult. It felt like that work didn't happen. So by the time you were kind of saying to MPs, right, you've got to come with us, there wasn't a lot of sort of time. It felt like the Treasury spreadsheets were then kind of, driving this sort of policy argument. But it's very, very difficult. I think with this new group of MPs as well, yes, there's a wide, big majority, but it's a shallow majority. And a lot of the new MPs are just in a very different zone. They're not deferential in the way maybe MPs used to be in an age of social media. They're also fighting for their own survival because some of them have got reform snapping at their heels. Some of them are sitting on small majorities. I think the key thing now is how does the centre rebuild relations with the rest of the Parliamentary Labour Party and then pivot out to the country? Because as Sam said, these elections next year are absolutely critical. Conference is going to be very difficult as well. And the bigger thing that the Labour Party has to do is come together, because if not, you are looking. Nobody wants this to be a one-term Labour government. That would be absolutely horrific. Nigel Farage is the big beneficiary from all of this. So whoever is to blame, there's got to be some kind of reconciliation, because the real opponents are not within the Labour Party. The real opponents are Reform and the Tories.
We'll have lots more from you later on, but I do want to bring you in as well, Nicky. Where do you think the Chancellor is right now?
Well, I mean, clearly she's had an extremely difficult day, and we don't know the reason for this. You know, we're told it's a personal issue, but clearly politically it's been a very difficult 24 hours. I think I'm struck by two things that Sam said. I mean, you're right. The first is it's a 1-year anniversary almost of a new government, and this government has landed itself in political trouble extraordinarily quickly. And the second thing I'm struck by Sam's comment, really on a broader issue, is a 15 to 20 billion pound black hole is a real problem. It's a problem for the country, and I think the issue with the Chancellor today is how the markets have reacted potentially to seeing a Chancellor who is clearly, it would appear, struggling with the pressure. I know Rachel Reeves a little bit. I have enormous sort of personal sympathy for her with your introduction captured, but we need the economy to be functioning, and I think that she's got some really difficult decisions ahead of in any kind of autumn budget.
It's been really interesting to talk to both of you and to Sam as well. We'll have lots more analysis of all of this throughout the programme, but first let's get more on what's happened today. Here's our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen.
A day after he was dramatically wrong-footed by his MPs, the Prime Minister headed to Parliament to take questions about dropping key elements of his welfare reforms. Before he even started, it was clear something was amiss with the Chancellor to his left.
The reformed welfare system that we're putting in place will be better for individuals, better for the taxpayer and better for the economy.
Kemi Badenoch went on the attack.
Sickness benefits are set to rise to £100 billion because of their mess. They cannot now reduce it. They can't reduce it because after last night's humiliating U-turn, we know he cannot control his MPs.
And then the key question, how will it be paid for?
People out there are frightened. Can he, Mr. Speaker, can he reassure them by ruling out tax rises in the autumn budget?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, she knows that no Prime Minister or Chancellor ever stands at the dispatch box and writes budgets in the future. That isn't what they did, it isn't what we did, and she knows it.
As the session went on, Rachel Reeves looked increasingly distressed and became the focus of questions.
She looks absolutely miserable. Labour MPs, yeah, she looks absolutely miserable. Labour MPs, they can point as much as they like. The fact is, Labour MPs are going on the record saying that the Chancellor is toast, and the reality is that she is a human shield for his incompetence. In January, he said that she would be in post till the next election. Will she really?
Keir Starmer didn't directly answer that one.
Well, the markets took an immediate slump at that, although the Prime Minister's team assured us afterwards that the Chancellor is going nowhere. Her spokesman said she was upset by a personal matter, but clearly the pressure is building on her as the government is left with a £5 billion hole in its finances.
U-turns on welfare were bewildering for those who'll be affected.
Most people watched on with shock. Right, how is this an appropriate way to be dealing with things that are going to affect thousands of people's lives, thousands of people's incomes, in such a short period of time, done in such a chaotic, essentially backroom way?
Later, at an event in Downing Street to celebrate Formula One, he couldn't escape the noise.
Prime Minister, why was the Chancellor visibly upset in the Commons today?
Standing by his Chancellor, both of them have a major challenge to regain momentum. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, here with us now is the Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds. Great to have you on the programme.
Great to join you, Sophie.
What went through your mind when Number 10 said you were going to have to do a talk to journalists like me after the fiasco yesterday?
I always look forward to coming on your show, Sophie. And listen, I'm a member of the government. We are a team. We won the general election as a team. I'm not going to suggest that the last week was anything other than challenging.
Challenging?
But we went through it as a team, and we will move forward as a team, and I'm absolutely part of doing that.
Challenging. That's the adjective you use genuinely.
I'm not going to suggest anything other than this has been a very challenging week. And by the way...
Challenging is when you're like, struggling to pass a level on a computer game or something. Challenging is not what we've seen this week when you've got your authority in tatters, you've got multi-billion pound black hole, and you cannot get some of your flagship reforms past your own MPs. That's more than challenging.
Well, First of all, the bill that was passed through the House of Commons last night is a bill that still contains some really significant changes to our welfare system. The universal credit rebalancing, which will take away some of the perverse incentives of people who want to go back into work but can't. The right to try, let me just finish this point. The right to try, people concerned that if they started work and it didn't work out for them, that they would lose the benefit they'd previously been on. But also things like, for example, people with severe long-term disabilities who've had to go through an undignified process of reassessment. They won't have to do that anymore. And also all this sits alongside the Timms review. Stephen Timms, very respected, who will look at the PIP assessment going forward, which is very important.
I'm in no way suggesting that all of these things are not really, really important for the people that they impact, right? I get that. But are you seriously telling me that this is like, just a challenging thing, the majority of the bill? Come on. You know,
I'm absolutely...
people aren't stupid.
Sophie, and I'm absolutely not downplaying it in the way that you suggest. And, you know, reflecting upon it, nobody defends the welfare system that we inherited. Nobody's suggesting that that is working. You know, young people, what is it, 1 in 8 young people not earning or learning. And in addition, let me just finish this point. In addition to that, you have 1,000 people who go on to claim.
I've heard the arguments on welfare from members from the government all week. If you forgive me, this is a huge interview that I want to do with you because your authority is in tatters right now. Okay, a year on, after winning a majority of 174, you are having to pull one of the major flagship points of your welfare reforms 2 hours before a vote on it. It is shambolic. You cannot get your own MPs to back your reforms. And worse than that, you don't even seem aware of the fact that you're not going to get it through, otherwise you wouldn't have pulled it just a matter of hours before the vote. That is more than challenging. That is shambolic. You'll admit that.
Let me just take the previous few days, because it was really important that we listened. But as I was just about to finish on the previous point, we went too quickly. I totally appreciate that, and I'm accepting that, Sophie. I'm not downplaying it at all. We went too quickly. What we are now doing, though, is moving forward as a team. We have a welfare state that is broken. The critical thing now is to move forward with the reforms that were passed last night, but also critically, and let's just take the point about listening and reflecting. The Stephen Timms review, the promise is that that will be co-produced with disability charities, disability rights campaigners up and down the country. So that isn't at all downplaying what's gone wrong. That's seeing that we needed to take people with us, that's seeing that we needed to listen, and that is precisely what is going to happen going forward.
The U-turn on welfare has cost £5 billion. The U-turn on winter fuel has cost £1.5 billion. You're going to have to raise taxes, aren't you?
Well, look, the budget is several months away. There's clearly going to be events. I'm not going to anticipate what might be announced in the budget. There will be, obviously, changes to the world economy between now and then. There'll be changes to our own economy. We have, business confidence at the moment, by the way, is at a 9-year record high. We've just completed 3 trade deals, including the one with the negotiations I led with the EU, with the United States, and indeed with
Why is
India.
the cost of government borrowing so high, business confidence at a record high?
Well, business confidence is at a 9-year record high. With regard to your point about borrowing more generally, I mean, that's something that's been historic, whether it was through, the financial crash and indeed through COVID. But let me just...
The levels have gone up recently, that's why I'm wondering about how that marries.
I wouldn't comment on, obviously, very short-term fluctuations, but let me just say the stability is what is absolutely critical going forward. That is why Number 10 said previously that the Chancellor of the Exchequer would be in post until the next general election. The Number 10 has said that again this afternoon. And the Chancellor inherited a dire economic situation, a £22 billion black hole in our public finances. She stabilised the situation, also providing investment in our public services, not least in our NHS. That is critical going forward, and that financial stability will be the rock upon which we continue to build.
Talking about financial stability, the growth forecasts have halved this year. The spending settlement has been done. You don't want to talk about tax rises yet, and I understand that, but you're right up to where you're able to borrow in terms of, breaking the fiscal rules. If Rachel Reeves breaks those fiscal rules, she's going to have to resign, isn't she?
She's not going to break the fiscal
She's
rules.
not going to break the fiscal rules.
No, the fiscal rules stand, and they are hugely important.
So you are going to put up taxes, then, aren't you?
In terms of the bedrock...
May as well start doing the pitch rolling now. It is, you are going to put up taxes.
No, look, the overall spending decisions and other decisions relating to the economy are taken in the budget, quite rightly, by the Chancellor later in the year. And obviously you wouldn't expect months before to anticipate that.
There's been a lot of discussion about Rachel Reeves at Prime Minister's Questions. Is she all right? Is she OK?
She is. She's working hard in Downing Street this afternoon. I've known Rachel Reeves for many, many years. She's extraordinarily resilient, highly able woman who has been doing an excellent job as Chancellor and will continue to.
Have you spoken to her?
I haven't spoken to her since, due to various commitments that I've had during the afternoon, but I know she's in Downing Street and is fine.
Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's Questions asked Keir Starmer if he could guarantee Rachel Reeves' future, and he just said, she has delivered and we are grateful for it. It wasn't a yes, was it?
Well, Number 10 has set out this afternoon absolutely that her position is guaranteed until the next general election. As regards Prime Minister's Questions, I mean, I've been in many over my last 10 years as a Member of Parliament. It is a bear pit. Prime Ministers do sometimes engage directly with what the Leader of the Opposition says, sometimes they don't. But the crucial thing is the absolute guarantee, which Number 10 has said, and I'm out saying this evening that the Chancellor will be imposed to the next general election.
I mean, I guess there are some people who might think that, Rachel Reeves is getting a lot of flack here, she's getting a lot of attention here, when really, the buck stops with the Prime Minister. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, started this programme saying he'd had a conversation with the Minister, saying that if Labour are losing around the country in next year's local elections, if you use Wales to reform, something I know you will care about, then it's over for Keir Starmer. Is he on notice?
No, absolutely not. The Prime Minister won a remarkable election victory a year ago and took us from our worst general election defeat since 1935 to winning a landslide victory. The Prime Minister absolutely will lead the party into the next election.
There's just one other question that I wanted to put to you, because my sense is, and I know that everyone has different opinions, but my sense is, putting party politics aside, most people wanted this government to succeed. We've had turmoil, we've had political instability, we've had psychodrama, and there was a desire for stability. The scenes we saw last night, the chaos, frankly, that we saw last night, the inability of the government to get its reforms through, the fact that we can't really trust you when you say we're going to do this, right up to the point when you can't do it, so then you change your minds. Do you want to apologise to people for letting them down?
This government has delivered over the last 12 months. I've already mentioned the 3 trade deals. You think about the 4 million extra hospital appointments that we've delivered in England with, look at the settlements of the devolved administrations, for them to be able to invest in the devolved health services, the free breakfast clubs. This government has done so much to be proud of. And I totally reject any comparison between recent days and the chaos of Liz Truss or Boris Johnson. This is a government that has been delivering and will continue to deliver for the British people. And quite rightly, by the way, that is how we will be judged at the next general election, and that is exactly how it should be.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you,
indeed. Nick
Sophie.
Thomas-Simmons speaking to us. Well, of course, the fallout from the welfare bill is sure to feature, I should say, in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the political commentator Adam Bolton and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. Well, of course, as we've been hearing, one of the perhaps more lasting effects of last night's climb down on welfare by the government is a black hole in the public finances that could total as much as £5 billion. So what options does the government have? I spoke to the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnson. Thank you very much for being on the programme. It's great to have you here. So what is the fiscal impact of the U-turn that we saw on welfare yesterday?
Well, the government was hoping to save something like £5 billion a year by the end of this Parliament, and actually probably more like double that in the long term as a result of their reforms. Now, obviously, they're not getting that saving, so they're £5 billion worse off than they thought they'd be. Now, in a sense, that's not a huge amount of money. The government spends well over £1 trillion a year. I think the bigger problem is the context, which is this tells us they really can't cut anything in welfare or pensions, as we saw. They've set their spending numbers and they're right up against the limit on the amount they can borrow.
Yeah, that's interesting when you say that they've set their spending numbers. In other words, you think that, like, the departmental savings, it's going to be really hard for them to find any savings in other departments as well, right?
It's almost inconceivable. There was clearly a really hard round of negotiations to get to the settlements that they've got with the various departments, cuts in the Home Office budget, which clearly caused problems with Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, cuts in some other departments, quite small increases elsewhere. And the whole of history tells you that once you've had a spending review, the numbers only ever go up. They never go down after a spending review.
And on welfare, you also think that's it, that there's no more savings to be found there?
Well, if you look at benefits for people of working age, the benefits that have gone up over the last few years are the health-related benefits. Other benefits actually aren't going up particularly. They're also very ungenerous on the whole. You look at the system, you think, which is the bit that needs reform? It is the health-related benefits, where we are spending masses more than we were 5 years ago, and the expectation is that we'll spend a lot more. So a whole percentage point of national income extra just on health-related benefits by the end of the decade. We'll spend far more on these things than on defence, for example. So if you're going to do anything, that's where you would do it.
Bloomberg is now saying there's a £20 billion black hole in the public finances, partly because of these U-turns, but mainly because of lower growth forecasts. Does that sound right to you?
I mean, we really don't know for sure. This all depends on the specific forecasts of the Office of Budget Responsibility in the autumn. I think what I can say is there is a significant risk, a real risk, that they'll downgrade their forecasts and present the Chancellor with potentially a really big headache. I mean, the Office of Budget Responsibility yesterday published its own assessment of its performance over time, and its conclusion was it is on average been massively over-optimistic. Now, if it kind of responds to that by becoming less optimistic into the future...
I get a lot of politicians talking to me about wealth taxes, saying that, look, there is a way out of this. Why don't we just tax the very, very wealthy or introduce these wealth taxes? Is this, I guess, like, if not a silver bullet, is this something that could be a solution, do you think?
Well, it's certainly not a silver bullet. I mean, you have to look very hard around the world to find a country that has got significant money from wealth taxes, and you could keep looking and not find such a country.
So no one manages to get much money from them? That's what you're saying?
No, they don't, and the countries that have tried have really struggled. And the problem is, of course, if you're aiming at getting taxes off people with more than £10 billion worth of assets, some of them are quite mobile, and we're seeing potential problems with the non-dom regime already, and others can afford very expensive lawyers. So I'm not saying there's no money there, and I think there is a case for trying to improve, actually, the system of wealth tax we already have. I mean, our council tax, in a sense, is a wealth tax, which is regressive. If you're in a very expensive property around the corner here in Westminster, you pay very, very little in council tax. So there's certainly scope for increasing those, scope for making capital gains tax better, scope for making inheritance tax better. But as I go through those, you see the wealth taxes we have, we really struggle to make work. Let's make those work better before we look at elsewhere. But the idea that you can get tens of billions from this, I'm afraid, is for the birds.
I mean, so the three taxes, of course, that they famously ruled out ahead of the election are, if you like, the big earners when it comes to money into the coffers, you know, things like VAT, things like national insurance, and things like income tax, of course. Are these the kind of things that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister need to, at some point, look at if they are going to plug this hole?
I think if you're looking at a big hole, it's hard to see how you fill it without looking at one of the big taxes. And income tax, national insurance, VAT are about 2/3 of our tax revenue. Add corporation tax on top, that's about 3/4. Now, you can do things to raise money, particularly from income tax, without raising rates. So you can extend the period for which we're freezing allowances and thresholds and drag more people into those higher rates. You can do things like, and I'm not suggesting that you should do this, but you could do things, and I'm sure the Treasury will be thinking about doing things to the taxation of pensions, really significantly reducing the value of pension tax relief. I don't think that would be a good idea, but it's one of the things they'll be thinking about, I'm sure. Or you do something like the last government nearly did but then backed away from. They said they were going to introduce a new tax, a health and social care levy, which looked very much like an income tax. Well, maybe this government says, well, we're not going to increase income tax, but we'll introduce a defence and security levy or something like that, which obviously isn't within the spirit of what they've said, but arguably is within the words.
You heard it here first. Just finally, you were not a politician, obviously, so I know you're not going to want to comment on politics or get involved in the personalities, but we have seen some market movement in the last few hours after the Chancellor's appearance at Prime Minister's Questions, I'm sure you'll be aware of. Do you think there needs to be more clarity over her position as a result of that?
I certainly think it's important that the Prime Minister and others around the Cabinet table say that they are as committed as she is to the fiscal rules as they stand and to saying they're not going to borrow their way out of this problem. We really do face a problem with the amount of debt we already have. We're already paying significantly higher interest rates than quite a lot of other countries because of the scale of that debt. So I think what's really important is it's not just the Chancellor saying, you know, we can't borrow more, that our fiscal rules are ironclad, that I'm really serious about this. You need the Prime Minister to say that. And you also need, actually, other Cabinet Ministers to say it. And I think the real hard thing is you need the backbenchers to believe it. And I think part of the problem is that we've seen that a lot of them don't necessarily buy into that, and to the extent that they have power over policy, I think that is going to worry the markets.
It's been really interesting to talk, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, let's chat again, shall we, to Aisha and Nikki, shall we? I mean, it's just so interesting hearing Paul Johnson said it all out, and it does, as you were reflecting on earlier, you know, the lasting issue of this, one of the lasting issues, is financial.
Yeah. No, it really is. And also I think Paul's last conclusion, which was the markets will also take from last night that Labour backbenchers do not have the stomach, quite frankly, to take difficult financial decisions. Now, that's partly the government's fault in the sense that without an overall narrative, you know, backbench, I've been there, you know, you vote on things and you're not comfortable, but you know that there's a trade-off because something else is coming down the tracks, which you can then explain to your constituents in a more positive way. And I think a lack of a narrative in terms of, you know, the welfare reforms sit alongside, you know, something else that is going to help. I mean, you know, we haven't heard much from Rachel Reeves recently about the growth agenda. There was lots about that, and then that's gone on. And that's obviously one of the other things Paul didn't touch on, but obviously you need to grow the economy would obviously be another answer to all of this. But his last point as well about the different levies and taxes, I mean, all of that, we can spend hours debating that in Westminster, but I don't see Labour backbenchers at the moment have the ability to vote for some of those difficult things.
And also, I guess Paul is also spelling out just how difficult all the options are for Rachel Reeves. Do you think that raising taxes is almost an inevitability now?
Well, look, just to pick up what Nikki said, it is really difficult. Look, the climate is incredibly difficult. And look, it's very easy to sort of be the peanut gallery and be like, oh, well, I wouldn't do it like that sort of thing. But, you know, like, good luck to anybody. I haven't seen any counterfactual. You know, we had the Tories for 14 years. That didn't go so well. Nobody has, like, come up with a what would they do. I mean, everyone can, you know, sort of throw their criticism and absolutely sort of right. In terms of your thing about the story and the narrative, I totally agree with you because there is some good... I know, like, we're caught up with the drama. You know, the spending review actually did go down really well with a lot of business sectors and a lot of backbenchers, because this story about investing in critical infrastructure, investing in defence, you know, all of that is actually really popular with the public, it's popular with backbench MPs, and it's popular with business. I did a big event with Sizewell C before the announcement was made. You know, there was a lot of positivity and energy. I did a big event with sort of motor manufacturers. They love the industrial strategy. They love the trade deals. You know, so there are good things, but there's no story. There isn't a kind of a narrative around it.
And when you're talking about industrial strategy and trade deals, that goes down well with business, but it's not exactly like, you know, we jump out of bed in the morning, old Sizewell C, you know, it's
that's also part, like, politics is the art of communication, and part of that is the government's job to go out and sell this kind of story. You know, I spoke to a trade union leader who was saying there is revitalisation of jobs and apprenticeships happening in places that are quite long forgotten, faraway places. In those communities, people are getting excited about their son or daughter getting a really good apprenticeship that could lead to
like you say,
jobs.
it's the kind of it's almost the language. Like they're talking about it in terms of jobs and giving young people, a chance to make something of themselves. And that's a different way of selling something, like you say, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. So the welfare reform, I think one of the criticisms that we've heard from, a number of Labour MPs, and I think when Liz Kendall did the statement on Monday, was they tried to pivot from it's about saving money to actually this is about the dignity of work. And, I don't disagree with that, but it was too late the start of this week to run that argument, that argument, because that would have then given backbench MPs an ability to explain more broadly the context of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that doesn't make it easier, but it does help in terms of that explanation for then the argument about the reform. And, that might just have won a few more MPs over last night.
Believe it or not, and I'm, again, not sugarcoating because it has been an absolute mess. I'm not there is... If this had been handled in a different way, I think there's actually more consensus. Of course, there was always going to be very, very difficult, sticking point to this, but there is a general consensus across the Labour movement that there has to be a better way of doing welfare to get people into work and protect the vulnerable. But I think there has been a big problem in terms of how this is the sequencing of it and the framing of the argument and the narrative.
Really, really interesting to have both of you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock is quizzed at the COVID inquiry yet again, and he defends the government's approach to care homes in the pandemic. Hello, welcome back. Well, MPs have overwhelmingly voted to prescribe Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation, a move which would make it an offence to support the group. The action comes after members of the Direct Action Group allegedly broke into RAF Bryce Norton last month and sprayed red paint into the jet engines of multiple aircraft. Well, the motion will be debated and voted on by the Lords on Thursday before it becomes law. Earlier in the Commons, the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, faced backlash from some MPs who described the move as a draconian overreach.
These prescriptions would not affect anyone's legitimate and lawful right to protest, whether that's about Palestine, Gaza, or anything else. The government has to take action when Palestine Action has orchestrated a nationwide campaign of property damage featuring attacks that have resulted in serious damage.
I understand what terrorism is. I was in London on the 7th of July in 2007, and I watched my community, this city, attacked by real terrorists. And at that point, rightly or wrongly, I decided I was going to Afghanistan to fight the terrorists. And I went because I love this country and I love our democracy and I want to see it protected. I think today's prescription order against Palestine Action undermines that.
Well, our political correspondent Rob Powell is here. We heard a bit of it there. What was the tone of the debate like?
Yeah, there was a lot of anger, but then when the vote eventually went to a division, it went through easily, 385 votes to 26, lots of Labour and Tory MPs voting in favour. In terms of those against, you've got a lot of the independent MPs that were elected at the last election, the Greens and quite a few left-wing Labour MPs as well. It'll mean this goes to the Lords now. If it's approved there in about a week's time, you could be sentenced to 14 years for being a member of this group, for supporting this group. Now, this change, this prescription, was actually bundled in with two other groups as well. It was Palestine Action, but it was also one neo-Nazi white supremacist group called the Maniacs Murder Cult and the Russian Imperial Movement, another white supremacist group. And what critics said was that basically was the government, they saw it as trying to railroad this through. They wanted a separate vote to register their dissent against Palestine Action. What the government says is it's evidence that this is ideology-free. It's not about what stands behind it, it's about their actions and what they do. And that was basically the argument that Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister, was making. He pointed to some of the damage that activists had caused, pyrotechnics, smoke bombs being let off around normal civilian employees at sites they were targeting, and essentially said, look, if this was a different ideology, if this was, say, Islamism that was motivating this, we'd all be in agreement that they should be prescribed. What critics were saying was, look back at other protest groups further back in history. A lot of talk of some of the tactics used by the suffragettes that involved criminal damage and law breaking, and they were saying, we agree this is criminal damage and law breaking, but that is different from saying that it's terrorism. The answer from the Security Minister was basically, we make the decision about prescription. This won't impinge people's right to peaceful protest in favour of Palestine. And I guess we'll see now when this comes into action, whether arrests follow for people that do turn up to protest against this decision and protest in favour of Palestine Action.
Rob, thank you very much indeed. Rob Powell bringing us up to date on that debate and that vote. Well, let's turn now to the COVID inquiry, where the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has been accused of presiding over a cull of older people. Mr Hancock defended his handling of what he described as an impossible situation as he faced questions over the government's approach to care homes. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has more.
The last time Kathy saw her father Michael alive was through the ground floor window of his care home. He died the next morning.
You don't imagine that your relatives' last hours are going to be spent in that way.
Kathy has taken legal action against the government, and the High Court agreed that Matt Hancock's decision to discharge thousands of asymptomatic patients into care homes was indeed illegal.
There is nothing that Hancock could say now that would make any difference. He made appalling decisions and he tried to pretend that he didn't, tried to pretend that everything was all right, even after the ruling from my judicial review. I think it's despicable.
The former Health Secretary returned to the COVID inquiry today.
And nothing but the truth.
And this truth is the only thing affected families want to hear.
At the time you stood on that press conference, did you believe it to be true when you said we had tried to put a protective ring around the care homes?
Yes, and I will stress the word tried. We were trying to do everything that we possibly could. We were in bleak circumstances.
But Matt Hancock's assertion has been challenged.
One person in particular said he blatantly lied about the situation with care homes. There was no blanket of protection. We were left to sail our own ships. He wasn't heartfelt. It felt like we were the sacrifice, a cull of older people who could no longer contribute to the society.
We were all pulling as hard as we possibly could to save lives. That's what I meant by saying that we tried to throw a protective ring around. Of course, it wasn't perfect. It was impossible. It was an unprecedented pandemic.
Matt Hancock has appeared here at the COVID inquiry many times before, and he's been accused of being insensitive and arrogant. And today's appearance will do nothing to diminish that criticism. He doubled down on the government's decision to discharge patients into care homes, saying it was the least worst option. And he said it in an inquiry room full of people who had lost loved ones in care homes. 18 elderly residents died from COVID at David Crabtree's 2 care homes at the start of the pandemic.
It was a question of what is the least worst solution.
Residents, carers and families want to know why.
We had cared for these people for 3 and 5 years prior to COVID coming, and to watch them die with no oxygen in care homes was appalling. I hope we've learnt lessons. It's clear that Mr. Hancock has not learnt anything.
We just need to check your pulse.
Matt Hancock insists he was doing an impossible job at a difficult time. He says he tried to protect the NHS and save lives. But the question remains, at what cost? Ashish Joshi, Sky News, at the COVID inquiry.
Well, let's talk again to Aisha and Nikki, shall we? Aisha, what's your sort of reaction to what we've seen from Matt Hancock today?
Well, look, in the spirit of Nikki's comments earlier about it being in government is really, really difficult. I think it was a very difficult situation that government ministers were in, to be absolutely fair. But it does look like quite a lot of mistakes were made. And this idea of sort of this particularly vulnerable group of people, what was happening in England, but also this happened in Scotland as well, to be fair as well. There's, when you look at it in aggregate, and look, if any of us were in that position, it would be really, really difficult. But when you look at the kind of aggregate, whether it was not enough PPE for care home workers and also in the NHS, what was happening in care homes, then when you look at the absolute debacle about the kind of COVID contracts and all of that, which I know the government's trying to reclaim the money. And also there's a tonal thing as well, as your reporter was kind of saying, there's a bit of a kind of a defiance in terms of we were just doing the best we can and that's it. I think for Matt Hancock as well, it doesn't help the fact that clearly there were some very difficult pictures that came out for him in terms of his affair with his advisor as well. So for him, I'm afraid it just doesn't look great.
Nikki, do you agree?
Well, look, I had the privilege of chairing the National COVID Commemoration Commission, which I have to say neither the last government nor the current one so far has yet responded to. And that was set up to do a number of things, but one of them was to mark the lives lost during COVID. And, looking at that piece, we shouldn't lose sight of the people who lost their lives. We're talking about care homes today, but of course there are many others who lost their lives as well. And that is traumatic for the families affected. I was also the commission about remembering the contribution of those on the front line and those obviously who developed the science and the vaccines. I think what I taking from today is the fact that this inquiry has gone on for a very long time. And when I talk to people affected by the commission, what they say is, obviously it's helpful to have the inquiry, but what are the lessons going to be learned? And actually, how do we make sure that as a country, we never go through this again? There may well be future pandemics, but have we genuinely learnt the lessons and make sure that nothing like this happens again? Absolutely.
Yeah. Resilience is a word we used a lot. Do we think we have really brought in resilience into our structure?
Yeah, that's absolutely what it's about, isn't it?
And remembering, it is the lives lost. So let's not forget those, as I say, today, who lost their lives in the
and our NHS and care staff who did such a great job.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's a distant memory for many people, but many people living with this loss every single day.
It's a really important point. It really is. Not all of us can move on so easily. Thanks very much indeed. Still to come on the Politics Hub. As the President promotes a series of Trump perfumes described as the fragrance for patriots that never back down, we'll take a look at the success and failure of other products under brand Trump.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, a family's fight for justice for the daughter who fell victim to a grooming gang. Jodie Sheeran was 15 when she was raped 21 years ago. The case never reached court, and the family was never told why. Now, after her death at the age of just 33, her mum and dad are campaigning for answers and a new investigation. I'll be speaking to them and the son that Jodie had as a result of that attack. That's the UK Tonight from 8.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, I think we all know someone who's, a bit of a nightmare to buy a present for. Well, worry no more, because Donald Trump may have the answer to all of your gifting woes. After flogging everything from steak to sneakers, the president's now promoting a line of Trump fragrances, described as your rallying cry in a bottle. Now, they're not an official Trump org brand product, but the president still jumped onto Truth Social to talk up the golden cologne. And of course, if perfumes don't tickle your fancy, don't panic, because there are loads of other options, past and present, from brand Trump.
$5 million this could be yours. That was the first of the cards. You know what that card is? Gold card. It's the gold card. The Trump card, gold card.
can't actually get enough of this. I can't get enough of it. Anything there take your fancy?
I mean, where to begin? I mean, I just love this
Trump
idea
steak, maybe?
of like Trump
Sneakers?
sausage. I mean, who knows? I mean, honestly, ladies, please. I mean, I just love the idea of like political perfume, like a bit whiffy, but also I'm just thinking, what would Trump perfumes? I'm thinking meaty. I'm thinking sort of burger juice. I'm thinking
I think you're overthinking this. I have to say, I think the fact is that, it couldn't happen here in the UK, I'd like to think. I think we wouldn't take ourselves that seriously. I think it would take...
Well, you haven't got a fragrance that you're Morgan
I've got some
perfume.
That is not a line I'm choosing to go down. I think if anyone gives you a Trump fragrance, it's relationship over.
I can't get over a Trump fragrance. I mean, I don't know if it's got the same meaning in the US, but it's like, this is a whole nother level of...
I mean, you say it couldn't happen here. I'm not so sure. I have a feeling, and I know this is going to be bad, I'm just thinking maybe Nigel Farage cologne.
I can't believe you have just said that. I think maybe it's the answer to the government's growth woes. They're just going to have to come up with a whole new fragrance range, and that's going to be enough stuff. I mean, maybe for the Parliament office, the gift, the gift shop,
the gift shop.
The gift shop. That somebody watching. Yeah. That's it for Christmas.
I thought those girls' trainers were quite cool. I'd probably wear those.
They actually look. They looked
quite cool.
They looked sort of like a bit more kind of. But I just all of the range is just incredible. I can imagine like a QVC sort of shopping channel with like Trump just going phenomenal, like just phenomenal.
That's a good impression.
Life goes the White House.
Yeah. That was actually quite good. So you can't see Keir Starmer going forward then? What do you reckon he could launch? Anything,
the odd law book. I'm just trying to think. Yeah.
Toolkits.
Toolkits. Very good.
Yes, exactly.
Very good.
Plenty of.
I think Angela Rayner could have it. I feel like Angela would be good.
Yeah.
Like, because she like drinks. I feel like cocktails, pre-mixed cocktails.
Shoes.
Vapes.
The Venom.
Venom. Vapes.
Yeah, the Venom
like,
was,
I thought shoes were her thing.
Yeah,
so
shoes.
maybe a shoe range.
Yeah.
I feel like Angela Rayner did like a party cruise, like an Angela Rayner
party cruise. If you're watching, Angela, Ayesha's got some ideas.
Yeah, we should call me. We'll do it like
loads of ideas going. Thanks very much for coming on. It's been great to have you here, as always. And it's been an absolutely bumper programme for us. Don't let me, never say that we don't cover the full range of topics here, from like Trump fragrance all the way to, really important reforms. Thanks. It's been great to have you both on the panel tonight as well. That's it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Me. And then, of course, at 9 p.m, you've got The World with Yada Hakeem as well. Another busy night for us. I'll see you tomorrow.